Re-Zero Side Stories, Royal Selection Prequel, The Successor of Blue, Chapter 1.
In the Dragon Kingdom of Lagunica, there are titles bestowed only upon special magic users. They are titles of 6 colors that correspond to the 6 attributes of the magic system: red for fire, blue for water, green for wind, yellow for earth. Finally, with black for shadow and white for light, the titles of 6 colors were bestowed upon those who have reached the pinnacle of their attributes. However, the history of these titles of color is still relatively new, as the system has only existed for only about 30 years. About 35 years ago, a civil war known as the Demi-Human War occurred in the kingdom, during which the efficacy of magic had been underestimated by people. The perception and treatment of magic changed significantly due to this war. Since then, the kingdom has reviewed its records and research related to magic technology and changed its approach. The 6 titles of color are part of this initiative, and despite their short history, they hold significant authority. However, they are currently only spoken of by experts, and it will take much more time for the value of these titles of color to be widely known. Therefore, Professor Garrich, why do they sometimes call you Blue? The one tilting his head in curiosity was a disciple of the person currently holding the title of Blue. In other words, even his student didn't understand the value of the title. It was quite amusing. He. That's hilarious. Why, it's hilarious, Ferris. Hilarious. I don't really understand, but that's good to hear. Praised with a distinctive laugh, a complex expression formed on the face of a girl, or rather, a boy with the charming face of a girl. With his light brown hair and matching set of cat ears, he was an impressive beauty. Felix Argyle, that was the boy's official name. Those close to him called him Ferris. The elderly man was among those who used this name. However, it wasn't just because of their closeness. Also, the way you call me Ferris, it sends shivers down my spine, so I'd like you to stop. Seeing your displeased face is this old man's pleasure. He. Don't take it personally, that's distasteful. I wish people like you retired soon. The kingdom must be seriously short-handed. Ferris sighed as he organized the cupboard, while the face of the man behind him twisted into a smile. He was a thin, white-haired old man. His pale complexion and sunken cheeks led people to sometimes call him a skeleton healer based on his appearance. In fact, he had a reputation for being more like a sick man than an actual sick person, even though he was actually Garrich Fabless, the kingdom's top healer. He was the person holding the title of Blue, approaching the age of 70. Not knowing the position of his mentor, Ferris frowned at the amused Garrich. Professor? Why are you making such a creepy face? Well, you've become much more assertive, and that makes me happy. Initially, you behaved like a stray cat, but now you're like my own little house cat. Calling me a house cat is a bit much. I wasn't exactly praised upon our first meeting. Pouting, Ferris sat on a nearby chair, resting his cheek on a wand. But, we've been together for much longer than expected, right? My perfect charm is starting to show its claws. Please send me back to Lady Crush already. Oh, don't say such sad things. Between me and your master, who do you think is more important? There's no need to hesitate, it's Lady Crush. He. Good to know. It would be strange to choose me. Please, no. Clapping his knees, Garrich burst into laughter, leaving Ferris taken aback. The two were conversing in a room of the Royal Treatment Center in the noble district of the royal capital Lagunica. The Royal Treatment Center was a large facility where excellent healers from all over the country were gathered, and most of the kingdom's healers belonged to it, dispatched to various cities and regions. Additionally, the Royal Treatment Center also focused on discovering and nurturing talent, providing educational opportunities to those with healing magic abilities. Ferris was one of those invited to the treatment center for this reason. However, because Ferris was recommended by one of the royal family members, and originally served as the attendant to a duke's daughter, he was given careful consideration at the treatment center. They didn't want to incur the displeasure of the royal family or duke. In the midst of this, Garrich took him in. If Professor Fabless is in charge, there should be no complaints. In fact, the child should be grateful. This was the final remark of a participant at the meeting. The others all nodded in agreement, But if they saw the current relationship between Garrick and Ferris, what would they think? After all, Ferris was unaware of Garrick's position. He suspected that his mentor, who was celebrated as a national treasure, was just an ordinary old man. Well, it is fun to see their astonished faces. Huh? Did you say something weird, Professor? No, not at all. Ha! Sighing, Ferris cast a somewhat disrespectful gaze at his merry mentor. Garrick didn't comment on his disciple's attitude. Not because he was laissez-faire, but because he considered Ferris's circumstances. Ferris possessed an exceptional and unparalleled talent as a healer. His latent talent far surpassed that of Garrick, acclaimed as the kingdom's best. In a few years, Ferris's healing abilities would reach their pinnacle, surpassing even the kingdom's best, and possibly becoming the best in the world. Without this awareness, Ferris had no choice but to undervalue his own abilities, as well as those of Garrick. Ferris's naive and shallow insights made Garrick find him irresistibly endearing. So, that's why I play pranks and tease you. Why are you saying scary things? Oh, come on. You never teach me seriously, so it's hard to stay on topic. This lecture will never end. Hey now, don't blame the teacher. You're a troublesome student, you know. Okay, sorry. So, why exactly are you called Blue? Is it because my face is pale and blue? How about that? Got it. I won't ask the teacher again. Dismissed by his disciple, Garrick chuckled in a hoarse voice and resumed the lecture. He taught the boy not only the applications of healing magic, but also how to treat wounds and illnesses, along with various prescriptions. Regardless of talent, there was much Garrick could teach Ferris with all his accumulated knowledge. Even without going through all this effort, can't you heal everyone through the use of healing magic? Maybe you can. But if you casually abuse it and run out of mana when it matters most, what will you do then? At that moment, your knowledge might save someone's life. We healers should have as many skills as possible to save lives. You're right. You make a valid point sometimes, Professor Garrick. Heh. Well, I'm an old man. It's my last chance to do some good deeds. Despite his discontent, Ferris was still focused on the lecture and was learning quickly. Garrick smiled sincerely, feeling fulfilled by both teaching and nurturing the young Ferris. If Professor Fabless is in charge, there should be no complaints. In fact, the child should be grateful. Those words came to mind, but the old man shook his head. At his age, he had found hope. It is not the boy who should be grateful, but himself. Amidst these reflections, Garrick continued the lecture, all the while playfully teasing his beloved disciple.
Chapter 2.
Now, it is the disciple that remains unaware of the mentor's parental love. Come on. When will I be able to go home already? His flaxen cat ears trembling, Ferris erupted in his room with uncontainable anger. It was already night time when he returned to his room after completing his classroom lectures and practical training in treating the wounded. After finishing his bland meal, Ferris collapsed into bed without changing his clothes. Oh, Lady Crush. I just can't get enough of you, Lady Crush. Pressing his face into the pillow, he called out his beloved master's name multiple times. His vision was filled with an image of a gallant figure that never fades, an honorable person he wanted to be with every day and every hour, having been separated for ages. In the first place, training at the Royal Treatment Center was not something Ferris wanted. However, he couldn't betray the hopes of his master, who had sent him with high expectations. Every harsh treatment and every frustration was proof that his dear Crush believed in him. Despite these encouraging thoughts, the training had far exceeded his expectations, and Garrick was not letting him go easily. It was enough to break his spirit. Sighing with weariness, Ferris turned his cloudy face towards the bedside, muttering, "Your Highness, Ferry-chan is about to die from a Crush deficiency. Just when I thought you got distressed, what is that disease containing such heart-throbbing words? It's a disease where the longing to see Lady Crush builds up until you explode and die. That's not a heart-throbbing disease. Ferris, are you okay? Don't die, okay?" Taking Ferris's joke seriously, the boy who visited the room turned pale. The boy with a refined face was the same age as Ferris. He had shoulder-length golden hair that shone brightly. Curious, gem-like red eyes, and a protruding tooth that peeked playfully from his mouth. His name was Fourier Lagunica, the fourth prince of the Lagunica kingdom and, to Ferris, his dearest friend after Crush, despite the difference in their status. However, His Highness is the cause of the current division between Ferris and Lady Crush. Hey, stop talking like that. I understand how you feel, but I didn't expect it to go on this long. It's for the best. I thought, Ferris has already spent 86 days and 7 hours without seeing Lady Crush. Sorry. I'm really sorry. So stop looking at me like that. It's scary. Ferris's resentful tone had Fourier scrambling to explain himself. The fourth prince, Fourier, was head over heels for Ferris's master, Crush. This affection was apparent to everyone except Crush herself, but due to Fourier's amiable personality, Ferris also came to recognize him as a suitable match for his beloved Crush. In essence, they both adored the same person. Their friendship was natural and expected. With that being said, Your Highness is being unfair. I'm still not forgiven? What more should I do? If you spin around and bark like a dog, is that what you want? I'll do it then. Even though I'm royalty? Oh Kai. You really are unfair. Ferris couldn't help but laugh at Fourier's feeble threat. Then, Ferris turned on the bed, folded his slender legs, and embraced his knees. Fourier, noticing Ferris's actions, started coughing. Oh, Ferris. While you and I are indeed friends, you must exercise decorum and discretion. Did I do something to upset Your Highness? Don't make such a face. I'm not saying that. It's just. You're a young lady, so you shouldn't relax so freely in public. Even if it's with me. For a moment, Ferris became nervous, but Fourier's words quickly dispelled the misunderstanding. However, another misunderstanding lingered between them. You're a delicate maiden. You were entrusted to me by Crush. It would be a shame if I didn't return you safely. No, even more radiant than you were when I took you in. As Fourier rushed to explain himself, Ferris smiled, feeling relieved. Fourier's earlier words caused Ferris to freeze because of his true feelings. Ferris didn't care about others' opinions. With that mindset, he didn't have to continue cross-dressing as a male servant to Crush. He didn't have to keep himself strong as Crush's follower. But Fourier was different. He didn't want to be disliked by Crush, Fourier, Crush's father Mechart, or the servants of the Carsten ducal family, who had all taken care of him. That is why, after several years, Ferris is still keeping his gender hidden from Fourier. He wasn't afraid of opening up. He was afraid of the potential change in their relationship. Crush and Fourier were like the sun to Ferris. Imagining a change in their relationship was as terrifying as a cataclysm. Ferris, are you listening? This is a very important topic to me. Huh? Oh, I'm sorry. If it's about something important, I wasn't listening. What? Oh well, I'll explain it again. As a delicate and beautiful maiden, it's not good for you to be too defenseless. Oh, that conversation? I heard that already. Isn't this an important topic? It's supposed to be helpful. Right? PFFT. Ferris couldn't help but burst into laughter in response to Fourier's earnest efforts. I don't know why, but I'm fine with it if you're laughing. Although bewildered at first, Fourier quickly accepted the situation. Ferris wiped away the tears that had welled up from laughing so hard at Fourier's attitude. That was funny. Since it was so funny, I'll forgive Your Highness. Can't help it. Oh, good. I'm forgiven. Although something feels off, but oh well. Fourier's ability to not dwell on minor details was one of his strengths. He cast off his doubts with a clear mind and turned directly to Ferris. I understand your complaint. Indeed, I too am troubled by the prolonged training, though, I'm not saying that I hate studying, you know, I don't doubt that. You're as serious as Crush. Perhaps Garich has something in mind. The title of blue is more than just a decoration. Oh, that blue again. Now, the word blue came from Fourier's mouth. Garich hadn't given a serious answer, but perhaps Fourier would. You don't know about the titles of color. I'm just asking if it's something impressive. Even when I ask the teacher directly, I just get brushed off. Also, at the treatment center, Ferris didn't have to option to ask anyone but Garich. Ferris hardly had any contact with other mages apart from Garich. It seemed that Ferris was seen as trouble by those around them and was kept at a distance. The reason was Ferris's cat ears prejudice against demi-humans was still strong, and people weren't receptive to Ferris's ancestral lineage. On top of that, Ferris was close to Fourier, a member of the royal family. Many people didn't find this amusing. Of course, Ferris had no intention of sharing such stories with Fourier. "You're surprisingly shy." "All right then, let me explain." Unaware of the circumstances, Fourier calmly accepted it and began his explanation as if nothing happened, raising his finger. Garich's title of Blue is an honor bestowed only upon exceptional magic users. It's recognition of mastery over the pinnacles of each of the 6 magical attributes. Then, is Garich at the pinnacle of water magic? Yes, exactly. So, you've received instruction from the most capable instructor in the kingdom. Naya, come on. The title of Blue isn't all that impressive. Disappointing. You sure are saying something, aren't you? When Ferris revealed his true feelings, Fourier widened his eyes in surprise. Oh, that's not it. I think the teacher's healing magic is amazing. I really respect it. What, when you say it's the pinnacle, that has me shaking my head. Ferris carefully chose his words, reflecting his true feelings. Garich's healing magic and knowledge were astounding, and there was much he could learn. However, when it came to healing magic alone, Ferris didn't think there was a big difference between them. To be honest, if I had healing magic as good as the teacher's, I don't think it would be that impressive. Well, that's quite a bold opinion. But Garich's power is recognized by everyone. If you can match that, I'll be proud to call you my friend. It's a relief to hear you say that, Your Highness. Ha ha, right. With arms crossed and chest puffed out, Fourier received modest applause from Ferris. Then, Ferris suddenly became curious about the titles of other colors aside from his teacher. By the way, what kind of people hold the titles of other colors? Oh, the others? Let's see. Garich is the blue, and as for the other titles? Yes, red, yellow, and green are all held by a single magic user. Really, all by one person? In that case, what about shadow and light? The remaining titles of white and black are vacant. I think, upon Fourier's somewhat uncertain response, Ferris felt disheartened. It seemed like the titles were assigned quite arbitrarily. Thanks to this, Ferris started to feel like they had misjudged Garich a bit. Ferris, are you doubting me with those eyes? Oh no, not at all. Oh, Your Highness, would you like some tea? We've been talking for so long, you must be thirsty. I also have some snacks, I'm not going to be distracted so easily. But yes, I would like some tea. Ferris diverted Fourier's attention to tea, giving up on serious topics. The conversation between the cat-eared youth and the prince continued late into the night. For Ferris, it was the only solace during the days when he couldn't see his master.
Chapter 3.
Witnessing a strange scene, Ferris suddenly stopped in the hallway. At the end of the hallway, an elderly man in a white coat was exchanging words with a tall young man. One was the familiar skeleton healer Garich, but the other was an unfamiliar figure, whose appearance was out of place in the clinic. Clad in purple garments with a mottled cape, and with long indigo hair, the figure's back was oddly conspicuous. This was the Royal Treatment Center's research building, and outsiders were strictly forbidden. The treatment center was divided into the research and treatment buildings, and encounters with outsiders mostly took place in the treatment building. The figure's strange appearance did not seem to fit the research building. Ferris. Perfect timing. Come over here. Let me introduce you. Just as he was starting to ponder, Ferris got called over by Garich. For a moment, Ferris considered feigning ignorance, but then made his way to the instructor, and immediately regretted it. Oh who? Is this the special student Garich was tar-alking about? Saying this, the figure turned around, and Ferris froze upon seeing his face. This was because the person's face was painted white, and adorned with inexplicable makeup that resembled a monster. Their almond-shaped eyes were mismatched in color, and the blue and yellow irises seemed disturbing. Overwhelmed by the young man's eyes, Ferris found himself unable to speak. That is a nice reaction. I do love seeing this from someone I've just met, that's quite tasteless. But, not bad, right, heh. Exactly, responding to the young man's provocative words, Garich slapped his knee in agreement. In front of the two laughing men, Ferris felt utterly humiliated. Can I go now that you've had your fun? Oh, not yet. I haven't introduced you yet. Ferris, this is Roswell L. Mathers. Quite an exceptional magic user. Oh, come on. Just the best in the kingdom, that's all. Ha, the best in the kingdom. Introduced as Roswell, the young man placed his hand on his chest and spoke solemnly, yet confidently. Honestly, it was hard to tell if he was serious or joking. However, the title of the kingdom's best magician did ring a bell. Could it be that you hold the titles of red, green, and yellow all at once? Ooh, as expected of the beloved student of Mr. Garich the Blue. You are studying well, aren't you? Impressed by Ferris' question, Roswell closed one eye and curled his lips into a smile. That's correct. I am the magician who holds 3 titles of color in this kingdom. You will give me the utmost respect and loyalty. Unfortunately, my respect and loyalty are already dedicated to someone else. Oh, no hesitation in your response. I see. That's actually the kind of answer I like. Though it was a reflexive retort, Roswell seemed pleased rather than offended. Sensing something inexplicable in Roswell's attitude, Ferris glanced at Garich. Honestly, he didn't want to linger. What was Roswell's intention? In short, I'm here to borrow something. I came here to ask for a textbook on healing magic. A healing magic textbook? For the best magician in the kingdom, that is a sore spot. Unfortunately, I have absolutely no aptitude for healing magic. As a result, I'm quite unfamiliar with those kinds of techniques. So, I've come to borrow a textbook. I understand. I, too, have no aptitude outside of healing magic. While Ferris possessed an aptitude for water-based healing magic, he lacked proficiency in any other form. He could heal wounds for Crush, but couldn't fight for her. That was Ferris's nature. It was hard to say which was more suitable for Roswell, but really, to revisit the basics of healing magic now. Does this mean you're trying to steal the title of Blue from me? Heh. Oh no, not at all. It's actually because I have a student with an aptitude for water magic, and I want to teach them properly. So, I thought I'd secretly brush up. If they have an aptitude for healing magic, why not send them to the clinic? Actually, Ferris was admitted to the treatment facility for this exact reason. If the person had a genuine desire to learn, it would be a much better solution. However, Roswell slowly shook his head at the suggestion. It's some children who absolutely hate being separated from each other. I can't bear to split them up. I just want to indulge their cute little whims. I get it. I totally get it. I understand your situation, Ferris, but your resolute nodding makes me feel conflicted. If you don't like it, then please finish my training quickly. Seriously, understanding the difficulties of separation anxiety, Ferris expressed his feelings rather forcefully. Then he turned to Garich with a sharp glance, voicing his discontent. Garich had the authority to end Ferris's training. The extension of nearly 2 months was due to the professor's decision. Ferris was starting to seriously regret his choice of mentor. You seem to get along well. That's right. No, we do not. After giving a reply, Ferris turned his head away. Because of this, he didn't notice. Roswell was looking at their interaction with a hint of admiration, and in that fleeting moment of sentimentality, unnoticed by anyone. Master, I'm finished. All done, meow. Startled by the sudden voice and presence behind him, Ferris jumped. He quickly darted behind Garich, and noticed an unfamiliar figure in the hallway. A handsome young man with deep blue hair and a resolute expression was standing there. He sported a monocle over one eye and was dressed in a sleek black butler's outfit. He appeared to be around 20 years old. I apologize for startling you. It was just a bit of mischief, a childish prank, just a bit. With a serious face and a perfect bow, the young man gave an honest confession. Sensing a foreboding in his demeanor and posture, Ferris glanced at Roswell, who nodded. As you imagined, he's my steward. Climbed, it must have been a lot of work for you. No, the archive was well organized, so there was no problem. I believe I have found the book you requested, but please inspect it. Visually, addressing Roswell respectfully, Climbed handed over a book he held. Roswell checked the spine and nodded. Ferris glanced over and confirmed that everything seemed to be in order. However, if there was a question left, I was in charge of organizing the archive until just now. After he finished sorting through the archive, Ferris joined Garrett and Roswell in the hallway. If that's the case, then Clyde shouldn't have had time to look for books in the archive. Yes. So, to avoid inconveniencing you, I retrieved the book quietly. Thoughtfulness. You were right behind me the whole time? Ferris was taken aback by the outrageous statement, and for some reason, Clyde appeared satisfied, raising his jaw. Without commenting on his servant's demeanor, Roswell turned to Garrett. Then, I would appreciate it if I could borrow it. After I finish reading it. I'll come back next in a month or so. There's no need to rush with a copy of the textbook. Instead, make sure to properly mentor that pupil of yours. That way, they won't have any regrets. I would never slack off when it comes to magic. Roswell bowed respectfully as Garrett patted his waist. He then turned to Ferris with a changed expression, a smile showing on his face. It's been nice to meet you. With a child like you around, I'm sure Garrett will feel relieved. That seems like a bit of an exaggeration. Not at all. Learn carefully. Don't have any regrets, huh? Ferris felt a sense of discomfort from Roswell's heartfelt words. However, Roswell then turned away from Ferris, not allowing the conversation to continue. See you. Liaise go, Clyde. After waving lightly and saying his farewells, Roswell started walking. Following suit, Clyde solemnly trailed behind the tall figure. However, as the steward passed by Ferris, there is no distinction between sexes in the heart of innocence. Please, be as you are. Craving, at the same time as the whisper, something was inserted into Ferris's hair. Instinctively reaching for it, Ferris felt the sensation of petals on his fingers. He was given a flower. By the time Ferris realized this, the clown and steward had disappeared down the corridor. Watching them leave, Ferris let out a tired sigh. How should I phrase it? They had very strong personalities. What? There's no harm in meeting new people. Roswell is one of the most respectable nobles in the kingdom. Respectable, meow, that's right. He judges people by their character. Blood and appearance don't matter to him. Respectable, right? Ferris bit his tongue at Garrett's toothless grin. Indeed, Roswell's attitude seemed genuine. Ferris even forgot to keep up appearances. This training in the capital is valuable. It's better to have something to show for it besides healing magic. You always have such a strange way of looking at things. Ferris looked awkward because of Garrett's rare consideration. His mentor had a point. While it was inevitable that Ferris had a small circle of friends, it was essential for both Crush and himself to expand on their allies. Knowing Garrett, it was likely half consideration and half teasing, but it feels like you're offering a memento, or settling affairs. What a loud, unappealing disciple. Despite having flowers on your head, the man from earlier did this on his own. Puffing out his cheeks, Ferris removed the flower still in his hair. It was a small yellow flower. No matter where it was picked, the stem and petals were still lush and vibrant. They mistook you for a girl. Not unreasonable, I wonder. Ferris felt like Clyde had seen through his gender in the end. While he wasn't bothered by being found out, he wasn't sure of the true intention behind the flower. Either way, I don't want to receive flowers, so I'll give it to my teacher. Ho ho, flowers definitely suit me more than you. Actually, do they? Please don't question yourself, it's tiring. Laughing profusely, Garrett inserted the flower forced upon him by Ferris into the pocket of his white coat. Then the old man patted his exhausted student on the back. Well, I'll accept it. I'll consider it your gift to me, but that's not the case at all, neither in source nor sentiment. Like I said earlier, doesn't it literally feel like we're settling affairs? Well, that's right. It's about time to put your training to a proper end. Walking alongside Garrett, Ferris widened his eyes at those words. As Garrett continued, He touched his cheekbones, and then, the handling and application of healing magic, knowledge of injuries and diseases. I've instilled in you the basics that I can teach you. The rest will grow within you. Discovering better ways to save people will be the work of young people, not old men like me. That might be true. So, what's next then? What should I do? Completing his training was necessary for Ferris to return to Crush's side. Ferris felt anxious in the face of this. Garich narrowed his eyes at his student. Teacher? Suddenly, his mentor stopped, and Ferris took 2 more steps before turning around. In the corridor, empty except for the 2 of them, the professor and apprentice quietly faced each other. Garich's expression was unusually serious as he looked at Ferris. Teacher, what? I've taught you the wonders of healing magic, the means to heal and save people. So, to conclude, after a brief pause, Garich continued. I must also teach you the limitations of healing magic.
Chapter 4.
Early the next morning, Ferris accompanied Garich to visit a mansion in the noble district. Garich rang the bell on the gate with a solemn expression. Standing beside him, Ferris silently fulfilled the role of an attendant. He hadn't heard anything about the situation. It wasn't unusual for a practitioner to make house calls outside of their clinic. Some individuals couldn't visit due to severe illness, or simply preferred to keep their ailments hidden. This was especially true for nobles. However, despite these considerations, Ferris couldn't shake off his mentor's words, the limitations of healing magic. Learning not only the potential of healing magic, but also its limitations, Ferris had been pondering the meaning behind the words of Garich Fabless the Blue. Thank you for waiting, Mr. Fabless. Before Ferris, who was lost in thought, the iron gate swung open with a call. Standing beyond the gate was an elderly woman who appeared to be a servant of the mansion. She bent at the waist and raised her head. However, Ferris was surprised by the sophisticated gesture. With an inscrutable air surrounding her, the woman straightened her posture and narrowed her blue eyes. The mistress is waiting for you. Please, come inside. With a voice that displayed no emotion, the woman invited them into the mansion. The mansion's scale was moderate, neither particularly outstanding nor conspicuous in the noble district. However, the garden trees and flower beds were well maintained. They likely had a skilled gardener. Passing through the serene front yard, Ferris followed the woman leading them into the mansion. Like its exterior, the interior was immaculate, devoid of extravagance yet adorned with tasteful furnishings. Without a word, the woman guided Ferris and Garich to a room at the end of the corridor. Please go ahead, Mr. Fabless. Stepping aside, the woman bowed deeply to them. Observing her gesture, Garich raised his hand towards the door. Slowly, he opened the designated room. The first thing they perceived was a strong scent of alcohol. They often encountered such odors due to their involvement with the treatment center. Alcohol was famous for its healing properties, preventing wounds and abscesses from worsening without the use of magic. However, the smell of alcohol in this context was a foul stench unrelated to healing purposes. Yo, welcome. I've been waiting for you. Mr. Fabless the Blue. As Ferris traced the scent of alcohol, a rather sarcastic welcome was given simultaneously. Turning towards the low, hoarse voice, Ferris spotted a middle-aged man seated in the corner of the room. He had fiery red hair, blue eyes, and a flushed face adorned with unkempt facial hair. Empty bottles of alcohol were littered around him, and he cradled another half-filled bottle in his arms. Uncomfortable with the sight of a typical drunkard, Ferris furrowed his brows. Huh? I'm not used to this unfamiliar brat tagging. What's the deal? He's my apprentice. He's been assisting me for the past 3 months. Today is no different. Assisting? Hey, have my ears or brain gone rotten from all this booze? Or has the reputation of blue lost its color, Mr. Fabless? What nonsense am I hearing? While exhaling boozy breath, the swaying man stood up and glared at Ferris and Garich. Ferris felt a sense of dread from the intense malevolence in the man's eyes. It was almost like a physical disgust. You can't do anything useful, yet you've got an assistant? This isn't a sideshow or a playground for kids. Don't mess around. Teacher, I agree. I don't think this man needs a healer. Taking advantage of the man's scolding remarks, Ferris tugged at Garrich's sleeve. Although it was just Ferris's opinion, he couldn't see any need for treatment in front of him. There was no sign of illness or injury. A twisted personality couldn't be fixed with healing magic. However, Garrich shook his head at Ferris's opinion. "You're wrong, Ferris. Our patient isn't that man. She's lying on the bed." "Huh?" Surprised by Garrich's words, Ferris looked towards the back of the room. Ferris was aware of the bed's presence. However, there was a man with a bottle of liquor right next to it, and most importantly, there was no sign of life on the bed. That's why he hadn't noticed. A blonde woman was lying on the bed so quietly that he couldn't even hear her breathing. "That's absurd, teacher. You're letting your assistant help without even informing him about the patient." With a flushed face, the man clicked his tongue and kicked an empty bottle away with his foot. Then, he leaned against the wall and started gulping down more alcohol. Ferris couldn't really argue against his blunder. Garrich gently patted his shoulder and approached the woman lying on the bed. Ferris took a deep breath and followed behind. Then, he looked down at the woman lying next to him on the bed. "What? This is, what?" He was confused by the lack of presence of the woman. She was definitely right in front of him. However, her presence was weak. She was visible, yet it felt like she wasn't there. Her breathing, heartbeat, body temperature, they're all weak but without abnormality. At least, that's my assessment. "Me too. I feel the same way. There's nothing wrong with her gait either." Following Garrich's quick palpation, Ferris fulfilled his duties as an assistant. He repeated the same actions as Garrich to ensure that nothing was overlooked. Truly, she has a healthy body with no problems. However, the diagnosis was made. Still, Ferris couldn't accept the results of his own diagnosis. Her health was unquestionable. However, there was no response typical of a living person. Neither during the palpation, nor at that moment. She was present, yet she was absent. Sleeping Beauty. Huh? This woman's condition. You can't really call it a disease. She's perfectly healthy. Yet, she just keeps sleeping, unchanging. She has had no need for food or movement for many years. Can such a disease even exist? Indeed, her appearance hasn't changed. She continues to sleep at a different pace of time than her husband. With a lowered gaze, Garrich's words helped Ferris understand the relationship between this woman and the middle-aged man. At the same time, Ferris became aware of how cruel it was to see a woman who appeared to be around 20 years old. If this explanation was true, the woman and middle-aged man had been separated for a long time. Stop it. Sympathy makes me nauseous. The budding sympathy in Ferris's heart was roughly rejected by the man. Though the conversation between teacher and student was hushed, the man seemed to grasp the gist of their discussion from their demeanor. The man glared at Ferris with a fierce glare in his blue eyes. Sympathy-like, shut it. I don't want your usual cheap consolations. I only expect one thing from you guys. Anything else just gets in the way. Slamming his elbow against the wall, the man blocked Ferris's words, opinions, and compassion. As Ferris fell silent in response to the angry outburst, a malicious grin twisted the man's cheeks. "And? I guess this time, you won't be able to deliver that one thing either? Even though I've been graced by the esteemed Fabulous the Blue countless times, I apologize for having such an inadequate wife. I'm truly sorry." Speaking insincerely, the man staggered towards Ferris and Garrich. He stood in front of the silent Garrich with a bottle of alcohol in hand, tilting it over the teacher's head. "Your way out is the same as always." The quack healer and his beastly assistant. The mixture of alcohol and profanity had Ferris boiling with anger. "However, I apologize for being inadequate. I didn't expect anything from you." Grumbling at Garrich's apology, the man sat down on the floor next to the bed. Flicking his hand carelessly, the man's demeanor left Ferris and Garrich with no choice but to leave the room. Teacher, how can I wipe you down? I'm not that wet." He must have been stingy with the alcohol. "He's a hard man to deal with. Have you known him for a long time? Do you think I had a choice? It's been over 10 years since I started making house calls like this." Garrich wiped his face with the cloth handed to him, and Ferris was left breathless by his answer. Over 10 years of house calls. This meant that the onset of sleeping beauty must have occurred before that. The woman had been asleep for over 10 years. It was indeed a terrible situation worthy of sympathy, but, even so, I can't forgive that attitude. He was speaking such vulgarities to a practitioner trying to heal his wife. I'm sorry for making you feel uncomfortable. I didn't think it would escalate to that point, but I underestimated his immaturity. I apologize, I'm not angry about that. Please take this more seriously. Feeling like the conversation was being derailed, Ferris raised his voice to the insincere teacher. Smiling bitterly at Ferris's childish demeanor, Garrett let out a deep sigh, his expression gone. I told you, Ferris. Today, I wanted to teach you about the limitations of healing magic. Are you talking about the sleeping beauty? Certainly, such a disease. No, it's different. It's true that I'm powerless against sleeping beauty. But the true powerlessness I wanted to teach you about is reflected in that man's attitude. Garrett shook his head, and Ferris was left stunned and speechless. Healing magic is not omnipotent. But even though it's far from omnipotence, it remains a source of hope for many. I myself take pride in having saved many lives. Whether I possess skill befitting the title of blue is something I'm still unsure of in my old age. However, hope can sometimes become a double-edged sword. The power that should bring salvation can instead become a poison, causing wounds and spreading toxicity to those it failed to save. There are limits even to healing magic. But I suspect your limits are higher and more distant than mine, or anyone else's. I know that, as if trying to persuade the silent Ferris, Garrett earnestly repeated his words. It was the kind of statement that Ferris would usually laugh off as excessive praise. But now, he couldn't do that. It carried an undeniable weight, an echo that could not be ignored. You are destined to become worthy of the title blue someday. The weight of expectations and hopes upon your young shoulders exceeds anything I've known. That's why I wanted you to know this beforehand. The powerlessness of healing magic, knowledge is a form of preparation. Just as knowledge of healing techniques saves lives, the memory of this day might save your heart. Always be prepared for anything. That's what I wanted to teach you. Ending the serious talk with a playful wink, Garrett returned to his usual demeanor. Ferris finally relaxed in response to his aloof behavior. It's true that I've learned a lot. However, deciding who becomes the blue is up to the kingdom, isn't it? I don't think it's something you can just casually declare. What? It's the recommendation of the current blue, you know? It's pretty much a done deal. I already hear a lot of gossip about me being Fourier's pet. Will that include you as well now, Professor Garrett? Living in the atmosphere of the capital was already suffocating. Adding Garrett's jokes to the mix was just too much to handle. However, Ferris tried to accept the teacher's concern and consideration in his own way. I never thought that healing magic was omnipotent. It was important not to misjudge the scope of one's abilities. And diligence should never be neglected. In the end, it might sound like a generalization, but that was the essence of it. Oh my, the elderly can be quite long-winded. Meow, he. That's what they say. To match Ferris's light-hearted tone, Garrett flashed a smile, revealing his missing teeth. Half of Ferris's response was sincere, while the other half was consideration for Garrett after facing the sleeping beauty condition. The teacher and student respected each other's thoughts, trying to return to normal, but feeling discouraged. I can understand feeling that way after 10 years of trying. You said something heavy in such a casual tone. No matter how many times you lose, never give up on winning in the end. I know someone close to me who has been losing in sword fights to the person they love for years, and Ferry-chan thinks that's precious. With a slight but proud smile, Ferris envisioned the candid grin of a blond boy behind closed eyelids. Alongside him, the image of a kind-hearted master with long green hair emerged, and a genuine smile bloomed deep within Ferris's heart. Yes, that's right. The two people most precious to Ferris were individuals of high caliber. That's why Ferris wanted to keep up with them and not fall behind. Teacher emphasized the powerlessness of healing magic, but Ferry-chan felt differently. In fact, I thought it had large potential. Potential? Even the sleeping beauty that can't be cured right now, it might be curable someday. Right? Even if the disease is currently incurable, It will be fine if research advances, if a talented healer worthy of the title Blue emerges, or if healing institutions undergo tremendous growth. Roads that seem to be blocked now will surely open someday. I'm sure that Ferry Chan's loved ones would say the same. Garrett silently watched Ferris, who spoke with confidence. The unexpected comment left the teacher momentarily speechless, blinking in surprise, but soon enough, Garrett's face wrinkled with amusement, and he laughed heartily. Are you referring to yourself as Ferry Chan? Eek. Why you're bringing that up now? Ferris inadvertently spoke like he did in the Crush Mansion or in front of Fourier. Embarrassed by being called out, he touched his blushing cheeks. As he traced his hardened cheekbones with his finger, the old man narrowed his eyes. Potential. I was going to teach you about that, but I learned it instead. Embarrassing, isn't it? You might be getting senile. You'll have to be careful not to make any mistakes at the next house call. Remember what I told you. As the two continued their conversation in the hallway, a guide approached them. She seemed to have come to escort the two after the house call. Garrett went to inform her of the diagnosis. His posture was apologetic, expressing his regret for not being able to help. However, Ferris felt like Garrett's back had straightened slightly. He hoped that his words might have had some impact, however small. I wonder if I managed to imitate Lady Crush and Lord Fourier a little. Saying it out loud made Ferris cringe at his conceited self-assessment. It felt presumptuous to think that he could even come close to the two people he admired. Ferris needed to focus on doing his best at what he could do as Ferris. Therefore, for now, I need to finish my training properly and get praised by Lady Crush. With his initial determination returning, Ferris followed the professor ahead of him with light steps. In his stride, there was no trace of their recent conversation. The fact that he was named the next Blue by Garrett Fabless, the current Blue, speaking so casually about such a heavy responsibility led to his carefree attitude, as if taking it for granted. Because of this, in later years, Ferris would find himself reflecting on these days over and over again. It all began just 10 days after these events, when Ferris, having completed his training at the clinic, and about to return to his beloved master, received the news of death. The death of Garrett Fabless, the Blue, from which the story of the successor of Blue would continue.
Chapter 5.
The emaciated old man lying on the bed seemed as if he were just sleeping, because he was, wasn't he? His usual pale, anemic face. A lifeless appearance, like that of a skeleton, clad in the familiar white coat that he always wore. Because he was like a withered old tree, it was difficult to quickly distinguish between his face while sleeping and his face in death. That's why, if you were just sleeping now. I wish that were the case, Professor. Gazing down at the lifeless body of an old man lying there, Ferris muttered in a voice devoid of emotion. This was the treatment building's mortuary, a room within the Royal Treatment Center. Here were placed the bodies of patients who had passed away despite their treatments, and arrangements were made for their families to pay their respects. Therefore, family had the right to be the first to face the deceased in this room. But Lord Fabless had no family. His wife passed away several years ago, and they had no children. He had a wife. That's a bit surprising. Beside Ferris, who was staring at the deceased body, a person with a determined posture lowered their gaze. Crush had almond-colored eyes and long, beautiful green hair. Despite being the same age as Ferris, her eyes harbored a strong and sharp conviction. It was a presence reminiscent of a sword, but her expression became slightly clouded as she gazed at Ferris's profile. It's all right, Lady Crush. Seeing the girl's gaze, Ferris spoke in a particularly cheerful voice. I'm sorry for causing you worry. To be honest, it was surprising. But after spending 3 months at the treatment center, I've experienced many times where I couldn't save or help people. Ferris, and besides, Lady Crush, you probably don't know this, but Dr. Garrett was really eccentric. Even in this situation, he might say, consider this your graduation exam. While laughing loudly, Lady Crush suddenly embraced Ferris, who had been speaking rapidly. Startled by the action, Ferris stiffened. He didn't dislike it. He was just surprised. Being embraced by Crush meant a lot to Ferris. It was like he was being rescued from darkness, like the day he decided to dedicate his life to her. Don't pretend to be strong in front of me. You are gentle, devoted, and sometimes even try to hide your true feelings from me. That's why you try to disregard even the most important moments, like this one. I'm glad you want to be my attendant. Thanks to that, I will always remember my shortcomings. Your existence is the most precious treasure in my life. That is why I want to repay you with even more than what you think of me." While held in her supple arms, Ferris was enveloped in the warmth of the words pouring into his ears. Crush's calm yet passionate voice always sparkled in the deepest part of Ferris's heart. Even now, while wearing a mask of bravado, Ferris felt it in his heart as he tried not to worry his master. "I'm sorry for being a weak, pathetic, and shameful attendant, mourning and grieving the death of a respected mentor. If that is considered weak and shameful, then I am happy to have such a weak and shameful person by my side. I, too, want to be pitiful, I understand. Please don't tease me anymore." Crush's integrity did not allow her to let Ferris off the hook. As a prisoner of her unwavering beliefs, Ferris could only tremble. Gently holding back his reluctance, Ferris moved away from Crush's chest. "Yes, I admit it. I'm sad that Dr. Garrich has passed away. It hurts, that's okay. As a person, that's the right reaction. It's natural to be hurt when you lose a mentor. Especially when it's caused by someone else." Crush spoke in a low voice to Ferris, who nodded slowly with teary eyes. Garrich had taken his eternal rest. But he did not die from illness or an accident, much less natural causes. The old man had been stabbed in the back with a blade, his life forcibly taken away. Garrich Fabless, the renowned healer known as the Blue, had left his mark in the Dragon Kingdom of Lagunica. His death came too suddenly, both for him, and for the people of the kingdom. For the healer who had saved many lives in the past, it's hard to accept such a sudden end. He was the one who kept saying, "When will I die? When will I die?" Despite being hailed as the kingdom's greatest healer, he had a habit of playing with the ideas of life and death. While he was diligent in wanting to save others, he was indifferent to his own well-being. So even facing his lifeless body now, it was hard to say whether Garrich felt regretful or not, but at least, he didn't suffer in the end. That's a relief. The cruel blade didn't torment Garrich before taking his life. He must have lost consciousness and his life in an instant, without realizing anything. That thought was a comfort to those left behind, but instead, they wondered, who, and for what reason, who killed Garrich Fabless, the healer who had been saving people his whole life?
Chapter 6.
The news of Garrich's death reached Ferris 2 days before he was set to leave the capital, having completed his training. After 3 months of training, he could finally return to his master, Crush. Ferris's plans were disrupted by the sudden death of his mentor. When Crush came to pick up Ferris in the capital, there was no emotional reunion. Their reunion was instead marked by the confirmation of a painful truth. This was the exchange that took place in the mortuary earlier. It's clear from the fact that nothing was stolen that theft wasn't the motive. Crush speculated so, holding a bag of coins as she inspected his personal belongings in the mortuary. The belongings had been discovered alongside Gallic, who had collapsed on the street. He wasn't the type to carry around a lot of belongings. To Ferris, who had served as his attendant for 3 months, it seemed unlikely that anything had been stolen. "I'm glad he was found in the commoners' district. And not in a dangerous area. I'm glad his belongings weren't vandalized. But if it wasn't a theft, there are many reasons why people harm others. If money or goods are not the reason, then matters of honor or resentment are possible. I'd rather not dwell on it. There might not even be a reason. So killing was the sole purpose? That is difficult to say. However, would such a disorganized killer happen upon Lord Fabless by chance? I believe there must be a reason behind these events." Crush focused on practical aspects, ruling out the possibility of an accidental tragedy. Ferris agreed with that. He wanted the culprit to have a reason, though he knew that there could be inexplicable malice in this world. If the goal was to disrupt the capital, could it be the work of the witch cult? "I understand what you're suggesting, but that's a leap in logic." "Certainly, if it's those ruffians you mentioned, they might target Lord Fabless the Blue to stir up chaos in the city." However, at that, Crush paused and glanced at Ferris, hesitating for a moment. Rather than malevolent scheming, it would be more realistic to suspect personal resentment against Lord Fabless. Crush did not mince her words despite the painful subject. Though it was brief, they had a mentor-student relationship. Ferris wanted to believe that Garrett wasn't the type to be disliked by others. He wanted to believe, but, resentment. Uttering that one word, Ferris placed his hand on his thin chest. Garrett had saved countless lives as a user of healing magic. His achievements were well known, and he was recognized as worthy of the title Blue. But at the same time, Ferris knew. He knew about Garrett's regrets and the limitations of healing magic. In the face of an incurable disease, healers without a cure could even be despised. If that were the case, could the culprit be a patient that Garrett couldn't cure, or perhaps the relative of a patient who died despite Garrett's efforts? If resentment was indeed the motive, that was the only possibility that came to mind. And as far as Ferris knew, there had been countless such cases in the past 3 months. Ferris pondered, hoping to find an answer among them. "It's about time we prepared the late Fabless's remains," the mortician called out to Ferris as he entered the morgue. The mortician was responsible for preparing the appearance of the deceased and ensuring that they were in a suitable state for burial. It seemed that the mortician was being considerate of Ferris, Garrett's personal student, and had waited outside for him. "Did you exchange your farewells for the deceased?" "I don't have any of those," Ferris reflexively retorted, and immediately regretted venting his feelings. However, the mortician seemed accustomed to such responses, and proceeded towards the deceased without showing any concern. Leaving it to the dark-skinned mortician, Ferris moved to exit the mortuary with Crush. Then, before leaving, "Please take care of the professor." With a bow, Ferris bid farewell to Garrett's remains.
Chapter 7.
"I think the suspicious one is that drunken redhead." Exiting the clinic, Ferris energetically shared his thoughts with Crush. Then, as Crush tilted her head inquisitively, Ferris explained the events that led him to this conclusion. After hearing the explanation, "I see, a family member of a seriously ill patient. That makes sense." "Yes. And that man. He really seemed like he was holding a grudge." Hearing Crush's agreement, Ferris clenched his fist even more tightly. In his mind was the image of the red-haired drunkard who had been hurling insults at Ferris and Garrett during their recent house call. While he sympathized with his plight, waiting for his unresponsive wife, it was still too much. "So, who is this man?" "Well, you see. Actually, my teacher kept his name a secret. But I know the location of the mansion we visited for the house call. If we hurry there with the guards, that might be a bit premature. We should investigate a bit more thoroughly before jumping to conclusions. Besides, we're not the only ones trying to track down whoever harmed Lord Fabless, right?" Hearing this, Ferris realized that he was rushing things. As Crush had said, all the guards in the capital had been mobilized to track down Garrett's killer. Furious guards patrolled the streets, and the clinic was busy with people besides the usual patients. Ferris himself had already been questioned so many times that he was sick of it. Garrett's death was a significant event for the kingdom. If they didn't identify the perpetrator, the kingdom's authority would be compromised. Everyone was taking this seriously. Even so, no one is as desperate as I am. "Ferris, please, Lady Crush. I know I'm being selfish, but I owe a lot to Lord Garrett. Please let me at least follow up on this lead." Bowing his head, Ferris earnestly pleaded with Crush. It was the first time he had gone against his master's wishes and insisted on his own opinion. Ferris didn't understand why his heart was in such turmoil. He couldn't say that he particularly liked Garrett as a person. Garrett was always joking around, never took things seriously, and because of the extension to his training schedule, Ferris had days when he couldn't see Crush. Their time together had been quite trying, but still, he had improved a lot as a healer, and had actually learned quite a lot from him. It was thanks to Garrett that he could meet Crush with pride, knowing that he had grown under his tutelage. For that reason, he wanted to repay Garrett's kindness. "Goodness, you're stubborn. Has some of His Highness's attitude rubbed off on you during these 3 months in the capital?" Suddenly, the sound of laughter reached Ferris as he raised her head in surprise. In front of him, Crush stood with a hand on her hip, shaking her head with an exasperated look. I have a soft spot for clear, determined eyes. Especially when it comes to you and His Highness. Did His Highness ask about anything? It happened often during the 3 months that you stayed in the capital. It seems he had frequent business to attend to near our house at this time. I was grateful for it. Smiling wryly, Crush seemed oblivious to Fourier's muddled feelings of affection. Though Fourier was diligent and earnest, it seemed his efforts had yet to bear fruit. In any case, Crush's smile disappeared as she gave a firm nod. It's your earnest wish. I couldn't bear to refuse and still call myself your master. I love you, Lady Crush, and I, you. Having been deeply moved by unexpected words, Crush nodded confidently, unfazed. Receiving reassuring words from his master, Ferris wiped away the tears welling up in his eyes. Then he and Crush set off towards the mansion that they suspected. Soon, without any problems, they arrived at a nobleman's mansion on the edge of the aristocratic district. This place, despite it being past early morning, they arrived at a mansion on a deserted street, and Crush furrowed her shapely eyebrows. Seeing his master's reaction, Ferris tilted his head in confusion. Lady Crush? Is something wrong? Are you certain the person you suspect is from this mansion? Yes. Most likely, he is the master of this mansion. I think, during their house call, the sleeping beauty in a coma had been referred to as mistress by the mansion's staff. Therefore, her husband was undoubtedly the master of this mansion. In response to Ferris's answer, Crush crossed her arms, her expression troubled. Then, in front of the suspicious Ferris, she began to speak. It was the Astria family. Astria, could it be? Unless there is another Astria family, you and I have the same idea. At Crush's stern nod, Ferris felt a great disturbance. The Astria family, the lineage of the Sword Saint, who had repelled a great calamity that befell the kingdom in the past, and was one of the 3 heroes, a family that produced generations of the kingdom's strongest swordsmen, linked to the Sword Saint. Naturally, their prestige surpassed even Garrich's title of Blue. Why is the mansion of the Sword Saint located in such a desolate place? Well, I suppose it is well known that the current head of the Astria family is a problematic person. Still, I hesitate to think he's become so deranged as to rebel against the kingdom. After exchanging their doubts at the gate, Crush proceeded toward the mansion on behalf of the flinching Ferris. Eventually, she reached out to the bell mounted on the gate and paused. The cause was the elderly gardener who had appeared near the gate. Dressed plainly, he seemed to be tending to the garden. Ferris, who had not noticed his presence, was startled and astonished. He was sure that nobody had been there just now. Sir, are you the gardener of the Astria family? Crush, who must have shared the same moment of surprise, posed the question without fear. The elderly gardener, appearing to be in his 60s, remained silent in response. However, the reason became clear soon enough. Gently, the gardener pointed to his own throat, revealing an old white scar. Lady Crush, this man's throat. I understand. Sir, I am Crush Carston, daughter of Duke Mechart Carston, head of the Carston family. I apologize for the unexpected visit. Bowing to the silent elderly man, Ferris followed his master in a polite greeting. The elderly man watched the two with a calm gaze. Today, I came to see the master of the mansion, Lord Heinkel. Is he available? In response to Crush's question, the elderly man placed his hand over his chest and bowed his head. Then, he retrieved a piece of paper from his pocket and began to write. This written communication was a substitute for not being able to speak. After he finished writing, the elderly man handed over the piece of paper. On it was the name of a tavern. If we go there, will we be able to meet him? Thank you. Let's go, Ferris, huh? Ah, yes. Tucking the folded paper into her jacket, Crush briskly walked away. Ferris hurriedly followed behind, stealing a glance at the elderly man silently bowing as they left. Although he didn't confirm the purpose of our visit, he didn't seem like the type to sell out his master without a second thought. Stopping a short distance away from the mansion, Crush turned back towards Ferris. Ferris widened his eyes at those words, and she handed him the note she received from the elderly man. On it, written in neat handwriting, was the name of a tavern, Casks. Let's go meet this drunkard you spoke of.
Chapter 8.
They quickly found their target at the Casks Tavern. This is the person we're looking for, Ferris. Fanning away the lingering fumes of alcohol, Crush asked Ferris for confirmation. Ferris, who inherited an excellent sense of smell from his ancestors, nodded in disgust. Yes, he is definitely the right person. But, the smell of alcohol. They were not inside the tavern, but in an alley behind it. Apparently, he had been thrown out by the staff due to his drunken behavior. Nevertheless, he continued drinking from the bottle in his arms. This man is Heinkel Astria, the head of the Astria family, and the drunkard Ferris remembered most vividly. Crush's opinion was undoubtedly correct. He is in no condition to talk right now. If I manipulate mana, I might be able to break down the alcohol and sober him up. It might antagonize him. Besides, I don't want you to get too close to this man. His suggestion gently dismissed, Ferris blushed at the implication that he was highly valued. Ignoring the embarrassed Ferris, Crush crouched down next to the man. Sir Heinkel. Heinkel von Astria. I ain't got no von. I'll kill you, idiot. I know. You don't like being called that, I understand. In response to Crush's call, the man who had been groaning with a flushed face suddenly emitted a menacing aura. Despite the man's aggressive tone and scent of alcohol, Crush remained unfazed. Scratching his head in response, the man finally noticed Ferris holding his breath. You're that brat from the other day. The useless brat with that useless old man. I apologize for my terrible first impression. But, considering I also remember you as a drunkard, it's best to skip the insults. Sorry, Hare, you've got a lot of hostility. I heard. That old man, he kicked the bucket, didn't he? Hearing the words the man spat out, Ferris narrowed his eyes. The man let out a satisfied sigh at the pointed reaction. The greatest healer in the kingdom, unable to cure a single disease in over 10 years. When I heard he couldn't even heal his own wounds, I was convinced. It was all a waste of time. What did you know about Professor Garrich? He was just a swindler trying to get people's hopes up. At least, that's how he seemed to me. The man's sneer made Ferris's vision turn red. Regardless of his involvement in Garrich's murder, he wanted nothing more than to choke the man right then and there, even though it was against the principles of a healer, a philosophy he was taught by Garrich. That's enough, Ferris. There's no need to talk to him anymore. But his anger was quelled by Crush's intervention. Crush nodded reassuringly at the red-faced Ferris, and fixed a sharp glare at the man. I sympathize with your situation and emotions, but I won't allow you to hurt my attendant out of spite. Out of spite? What are you? With Lord Fabless's passing, you lost the healer who tended to your wife. Therefore, you drown yourself in alcohol to forget your grief. Am I wrong? Damn it. Don't act like you understand. In response to Crush's decisive words, the infuriated man tried to stand up. However, his intoxicated body staggered, causing him to hit the wall and collapse back onto the ground. He couldn't get back up no matter how hard he tried. Ferris, let's go. This man posed no threat to Lord Fabless. He had no reason to. Wait. Damn it. As they left the man groaning on the ground, Crush didn't spare him a glance. After his master's brisk departure, Ferris hurriedly followed. I'm sorry. I lost my composure for a moment. Crush apologized to Ferris as they emerged from the alleyway onto the street. Seeing his master's face grow stiff, Ferris hurriedly waved his hands in denial. I'm the one who should apologize for causing you distress, Lady Crush. I thought I was prepared, yet here I am. I'm appalled by my own pettiness. But your suspicions have been answered. That man is not the culprit. Did you find that out through your divine protection? Yes. Regardless of the reason, that man is mourning the death of Lord Fabless. With amber eyes showing conviction, Crush asserted herself with confidence. Crush's conviction was based on her divine protection of wind reading. This divine protection allowed her to literally see the wind, and she even perceived the emotions of people she met as wind. For this reason, it was very difficult to lie to Crush. Of course, Crush was not constantly using her divine blessing, and those close to her could sometimes bypass her blessing's insights, but that person wasn't doing either. Disappointed by the result, Ferris let his shoulders slump. He had no reason to doubt Crush's eyes or exalt the man's acting skills. There was no causal relationship between the man and Garrich's death. There are other relatives of the professor's patients, though. We should inform the guards and have them investigate. We seem to be lacking in expertise. Although the idea of revenge had not disappeared, it felt less believable after this misstep. After all, the motive of the culprit behind Garrich's death remained unclear. Don't look so down. Evil deeds will be punished. The killer of Lord Fabulous will be as well. Crush comforted Ferris by embracing his shoulders. Resting his head on his master's shoulder, Ferris nodded quietly in response. However, despite Crush's words, the culprit behind Garrich's death was never found, and as the case remained unsolved, the day of Garrich's state funeral arrived.
Chapter 9.
Garrich's passing is unfortunate. I am heartbroken as well. Fourier, whom Ferris had not seen in a few days, spoke these words in a somber tone. Even the ever-positive and persevering Fourier could not help but be saddened by the death of an acquaintance. The grief shown by the emotional Fourier was a powerful reminder that Garrich had truly passed away. Garrich Fabulous's state funeral was carried out on a grand scale, contrary to the modest nature of the deceased. It was a gesture of the kingdom's goodwill towards Garrich, who had no family to see him off. From a cynical perspective, perhaps it was the desire to finally give a minimal amount of status to the man who had been awarded the title of Blue. If he saw this, he'd probably be uncomfortable and tell us not to make such a fuss. Definitely. As one would expect from his apprentice, you're very observant, Ferris. Not wanting to dwell on dark thoughts, Ferris tried to make light of the situation, and Fourier joined in. Crush, who was also present, smiled faintly at them. The three attending the funeral were dressed in black formal attire. Fourier, usually dressed in flamboyant clothes, was transformed into a handsome young man with a charming face. It's nice to see your highness dressed up now and then. Is that so? I don't feel very comfortable, though. What do you think, Crush? I understand what you mean. Your highness always looks splendid, but I also feel more at ease with your usual attire. I see. So you prefer my usual self? Well, I'm relieved. In front of the satisfied Fourier, Crush and Ferris were also smiling at one another in formal clothes. However, their outfits were reversed considering their gender, with Crush wearing men's clothes, and Ferris in women's clothing. Shouldn't Crush have worn formal women's attire on an occasion like this? I don't want to deceive myself, especially at a time like this. Besides, I want to approach the funeral with a clear heart and mind. The one who hurt Garrich hasn't been found yet. Fourier's troubled expression and the furrows between his brows indicated that the culprit was still unknown. According to Ferris's deductions, interviews were conducted with Garrich's patients and those involved with them, but no significant progress had been made. Ultimately, if even the motive was unclear, the likelihood that it was a random act of violence increased. In that case, we might just have to admit defeat. Don't get so overwhelmed, Ferris. Garrich wouldn't want to see you so downtrodden. Your Highness, I won't ask you to smile right away. But if you keep your head lowered, Garrich will feel hurt. No, it's cowardly to use the dead as an excuse. I'm the one feeling hurt. So, lift your head. Truly, this Fourier guy had a strange charm about him. If he always acted like this, there would be no need to worry about his romance with Crush. What an idiot. Your Highness, you really are a wasted talent. What's gotten into you all of a sudden? A wasted talent? What kind of riddle is this? Because of Ferris's casual remark, the wide-eyed Fourier started to panic. Seeing Fourier return to his usual self, Ferris felt even more grateful to him. Your Highness, Fourier. It's time you returned to the waiting room. Just as the exchange came to an end, a stern male voice came from outside the room. At Fourier's command to enter, a tall man appeared in front of them. Giving the impression of a rock, the man was wearing a rugged set of full-body armor and a helmet. Ferris had been introduced by Fourier once before. In truth, he was a member of the Knights. Marcos. Is it time already? Yes. Everyone, including His Highness Zabinal, is already here. I'm afraid I must ask Your Highness Fourier to return as well. I know. I wouldn't want to anger my brothers. I shall return as well." In response to Fourier's answer, the knight Marcos Gilduc bowed his head. Since the incident with Garich, all important people were assigned bodyguards, and it was Marcos who stood by Fourier's side. He was patient with Fourier, who was free-spirited, to say the least. "I'm surprised your brothers could make it, given the short notice. That is because of the great accomplishments of Lord Garich." His Highness Zabinal had also urged the dragon carriage to arrive quickly. Otherwise, it would take a rare opportunity for everyone from the royal family to gather. "Yes, that's correct." "Right. Crush, would you like to come greet my brothers?" "No, I think I would only bother them before the funeral service. If possible, after the funeral." "Yes, you're right. That was foolish of me. Well then, I will let them know." With those words, Fourier left the room with Marcos. As he was leaving, Marcos took a bow and closed the door, leaving Ferris and Crush alone in the room. "Wouldn't passing along your regards be the same as going to greet them personally? It's been a long time since I've met His Highness's brothers." "I'm sure His Highness was just being considerate. I think you might be overestimating His Highness." While Fourier certainly had great potential, whether that potential could be realized was another matter. Rather, his personality was why they eagerly anticipated the realization of his great potential. Chuckling at Crush's assessment of Fourier, Ferris waited for the funeral to begin. It was an hour before it began, a grand funeral attended by all members of the royal family, including Fourier. Garich himself would probably hate it. But there was no stopping it now. The death of Garich Fabless the Blue had a special significance. Suddenly, Ferris frowned. For a moment, a sense of unease passed through his mind. Holding onto the vague feeling, Ferris gathered the scattered pieces of information in his head and pieced them together. The death of Garich. Not a robbery, it was an unreasonable conclusion to the life of the Blue. A random murder was inconsistent, and there was no pain that would suggest a grudge. Then, its aim was not the professor's life, but something created by his death. Garich Fabless the Blue had no close relatives. His death became a national funeral, attended by royalty and dignitaries across the kingdom to mourn him. If that situation itself was the culprit's aim. Ferris, seeing Ferris's ears perked up, Crush lowered her voice. Ferris looked up at Crush and wet his pink lips with his tongue. "Lady Crush, will you believe what I'm about to say?" Of course. Having his question answered without hesitation, Ferris widened his eyes. Then, with a slight smile, he continued, "Lady Crush, I love you, as I love you." The two reaffirmed their bond as master and servant, rising from their chairs with determination.
Chapter 10.
The venue of the funeral had a unique atmosphere. With the coffin on the platform at the center, the hall was filled with a peculiar blend of sanctity and grandeur. It caused people to naturally straighten their spines and clear their minds. This is a funeral. What is going on? It is a mandatory check before the state funeral. We will return immediately upon completion. The staff that had been preparing the funeral protested against the sudden appearance of the group. However, they were easily repelled by the imposing figure of Marcos at the front. After silencing the people in the hall, Marcos turned to Ferris behind him. Despite Lord Fourier's words, "If nothing comes of this, it will become a problem. If nothing comes of it, shouldn't we be happy?" His Highness would certainly say so. Ferris pursed his lips in response to the warning, and Marcos made a sour face. Indeed, he might have pictured Fourier making such a statement. If so, he was one of the many who had been poisoned by Fourier. But if there really is nothing, then I apologize, Lady Crush. There's no need to apologize. I responded to your request. At that moment, all decisions fell under my responsibility. Don't try to take my responsibility onto yourself. Encouraged by the steadfast Crush, Ferris flipped up the hem of his skirt and ascended the platform. The casket containing Garich's lifeless body was placed at an angle on the altar adorned with serene stone statues and flowers. Opening the closed lid would allow for a face-to-face encounter with his mentor's death. After a moment of hesitation, Ferris opened the casket with slender fingers. Inside was Garich's corpse, exhibiting a slightly healthier complexion thanks to post-mortem makeup. "Teacher, You look better than when you were alive." Perhaps it was thanks to the skill of the embalmer that Garrich's expression appeared peaceful in death. His back wounds were sutured, and his organs, prone to decay, had been removed before the funeral. Touching the corpse, which seemed more vital in death than in life, Ferris breathed a sigh. Then, he began infusing his water mana into Garrich's remains. "What are you doing to the deceased?" "Quiet. Let's leave this to Ferris." The dark-skinned embalmer widened his eyes at Ferris's actions. Crush had stalked him, and Ferris tried to live up to her trust. If Garrich's death was orchestrated in anticipation of the state funeral that followed, then the motive behind his murder lies not with him, but in creating the circumstances of this state funeral. This situation, with royalty and dignitaries from across the kingdom in attendance, was the killer's goal. In that case, there must be a trap inside the venue. It must be in a place that the perpetrator approached at least once. Attendees will all leave flowers on the professor's casket. Therefore, Ferris reasoned that if there was a trick, it had to be either inside Garrich himself or his coffin. Ferris extended his consciousness to every corner of Garrich's corpse, where the circulation of mana had already stopped. Tracing the dried-up veins of life, Ferris examined the deceased thoroughly. As a result, "It's over. There's nothing abnormal with the professor's body." As Ferris spoke with sweat covering his forehead, he sensed a commotion behind him. It could be resentment from causing a commotion and yielding no results. Or it could be anger from disturbing the casket of the deceased, desecrating their dignity as a result. However, among all of that, why is it that you exude a wind of relief, unlike the others? Pierced by an amber gaze, the dark-skinned mortician's expression grew stiff. Neither this reaction nor the release of tension just before escaped the gaze of Ferris's amazing master. "A wind of relief? What exactly are you saying?" "There's no need for petty lies. I can see your true intentions." As the embalmer recoiled, Crush approached. At her side, Marcos slowly drew his long sword, instructing other people in the venue to step back. "See Sir Gildark. Such baseless accusations will not be tolerated. If you are truly innocent, then surrender yourself gracefully. Despite Lady Carston's kindness, I will show no mercy towards enemies of the kingdom. Fear not, Lord Marcus. My sword is just as merciless to the kingdom's enemies." Crush, who arrived without a sword, grabbed hold of the wind and relaxed her expression. With steel swords and invisible blades of wind pointed at him, the mortician froze in place, and then that earlier statement was a lie. "You embedded something strange inside the professor's body, didn't you?" "Wah, you seem to have done quite thorough research on the professor's body and gait. Anyone other than Ferry Chan might have missed it." "How horrible." Sticking her tongue out at the mortician, a surge of mana flowed from Ferris's palm into the old man's corpse. Deeper and deeper into his teacher's remains it flowed, where he grasped something dark and foreign. "Teacher, if it hurts, you can cry, okay." Half joking and half serious, Ferris said this as he forcefully pulled the dark foreign object from Garrich. A gruesome sound, akin to peeling skin, reverberated, and everyone around grimaced. Only Crush and Marcos maintained their composure. Then the foreign object was torn off. "This mana is woven in such a disgusting way. Are you a user of curse arts, rather than a healer?" What, saying I use curse arts? I am a healing practitioner. A first-rate one at that. Ferris disintegrated the curse he had removed, dispersing it into harmless mana. The mortician became enraged, and howled with bloodshot eyes. "You're a demon, a child of a demi-human. Your impure blood had driven Lord Fabless crazy. The true successor of Blue. It should have been me, yet the kingdom, and even Master Fabers, misjudged my talents. A practitioner who deals not with the living, but the dead? And that the peace of the dead is also a healer's duty? What stupidity." Stomping his feet, the mortician man spewed forth a string of childish arguments, pleading with a serious face and voice. He lamented his misfortune and the mistakes of the kingdom and Garrich. There is no value in a man who overlooked the blue of the next generation and had no future. That is why I asked Master Fabless to serve as a stepping stone for the rightful succession. The rightful succession. During the state funeral, a poisonous wind would suddenly spread through the venue crowded with numerous dignitaries. The poison gradually invades the throat, robbing the lungs of air. When breath grows thin, on the brink of death. If someone were to appear to save them, would anyone doubt the skills of that practitioner? With grandiosity, the man laid bare his magnificent and proud plan. Even Crush was left speechless as he puffed his chest out, and Marcos shook his head. In essence, the man was dissatisfied with his circumstances, blaming Garich and the country. To prove his own competence, he had infused poison into Garich's remains, intending to purify the poison himself and bask in the limelight, all for such a stupid idea. Fear not. Master Fabers was foolish, but I am forgiving. I did not inflict suffering upon him. Of course, I have no intention of letting anyone die at the venue either. With a faint smile, the man heartily nodded at Ferris's trembling voice. His demeanor was not mocking, and he appeared to be genuine. The man's mentality had already transcended that of ordinary people. Surprisingly, there's no sign of a lie. Crush, who had been silently listening to the man, blurted this out. With a hint of surprise in her otherwise dignified and sharp gaze, Crush narrowed her amber eyes. These eyes read the emotions of people I face like the wind. Therefore, I am sensitive to lies. Yet, there is not the slightest hint of falsehood in your words. Of course not. What reason would there be for deception at this point? The man's anger toward his misfortune, and the actions he took to relieve it, were all justified in his eyes. Therefore, even in Crush's eyes, the aura surrounding the man was that of a saint. You stubbornly believe your delusions to be the truth. I have no more room to listen to you. There is no room for leniency. For the sake of Garich and the kingdom, this man should die here. With that assertion, Crush and Marcos moved simultaneously to cut down the man. However, the man was prepared for this. He placed his hands on his white coat and opened the front. A true medical practitioner never neglects preparations. This is also from the book of Master Fabless. Taking advantage of the situation, the man quoted these teachings as 3 black spheres rolled out from his white coat. 3 fist-sized spheres bounced with a thud. Now, taste the essence of poison that eats at the body from the very core. The poison spheres burst open, releasing an evil mana that was toxic to human bodies. It was a poison just as potent as the one implanted in Garich, and it was capable of knocking out everyone at the venue. If exposed to it, even Crush and Marcos would. Unfortunately, I am immune to poison. However, the man's trump card could not penetrate a knight of the Royal Guard, whose conviction was as strong as a rock. Immediately after his solemn declaration, he emerged from the poisonous smoke in the venue. To Ferris, he looked like a lump of rock. In fact, his entire body was clad in grey rock, resembling a suit of armor. As a giant of stone in thick armor, he looked ridiculous holding a knight's long sword. This was Marcos Gildark, the rock, showing his true colors. He was clad in armor composed of stone, so no amount of raw poison would work on him. Of course, even if he himself was safe, it didn't mean that the people in the venue were immune to the effects of the poison. Poisonous smoke. You have misread the wind. Using her divine protection of wind reading to grab hold of the wind, Crush unleashed invisible wind blades with her technique. Facing this, the poisonous smoke was meaningless. The wind wound the poison around itself, and instead of covering the venue, it gathered all in one place. Ferris then approached the poison. Honestly, this isn't a deadly poison. How could claim to save everyone? Well, even if you can't do it, I can with enough time. I see. I'm already finished, though. Raising his hand and sticking out his tongue, Ferris neutralized the poisonous mana, breaking it down and rendering it harmless. It was likely faster, easier, and more straightforward than what the man had planned. I don't care who the next blue is, but there was nothing wrong about Professor Garich's judgment, teachings, or methods. His beliefs shattered, and the man looked aghast. Ferris glanced at him from the side as he took hold of Crush's arm. Lady Crush, please allow me a bit of rudeness from now on. Permission granted. When Ferris asked for permission, Crush granted it without hesitation. Smiling at his master's kindness, Ferris turned towards the man with a cruel gaze. Die, you delusional bastard. The man tried to utter words of anger at Ferris's proclamation. However, his attempt was intercepted by a massive boulder that charged forward, shaking the venue. The rock did not slow down as it collided with the man's body, a traitor who draws his bow against the kingdom. Get crushed along with all your shallow ambitions. Marcos's exclamation was not wrong, as the man's final words of resentment were swallowed in the impact without even so much as a scream, and he burst into a bloody mist, disappearing. This was the end of the pitiful man who killed Garich Fabulous, the Blue.
Chapter 11.
Oh, come on. You're so bad at organizing. I can't believe this, the voice echoed from Garich's private room in the research building of the treatment center, in the late afternoon. The laboratory was deserted after the loss of its master, and the tools used by the deceased had already been taken over as shared equipment at the treatment center. What remained in the room were the personal belongings of the deceased, though there weren't many, as he was not the kind to leave behind lots of things. The books on the shelf aren't even in order. Ferry-chan hates this sort of thing. I hate it. He's harassing me even after death. I highly doubt Lord Fabulous would have such intentions. You're jumping to conclusions, no. Even with all due respect to you, Lady Crush, Ferry-chan is right about this. That man would definitely do it. That's the kind of annoying person he was. Crush was taken aback by Ferris's confident assertion and chuckled. The funeral had concluded smoothly, and Garich's coffin had been laid to rest in the kingdom's cemetery. The murderer had already been executed, and now they were here to tidy up the private room of the deceased healer, which was no longer full of guards. As mentioned earlier, the tools used by Garich during his life as a healer had been taken over by the treatment facility following his wishes. This was likely a better outcome for Garich than to be buried with them. Instead, what was left for his disciple, Ferris, was this disorganized bookshelf and all the estranged documents. With pursed lips, Ferris kept alternating his gaze between the stack of papers on his desk and the haphazardly packed bookshelf. Both were in such a messy state that he hesitated to touch them, but staring at them won't make it go away. It's time to make up your mind. Fine. Being a disciple doesn't mean I'm a personnel maid. Grumbling to himself, Ferris began tidying up the desk. Seeing this, Crush took off her jacket and helped with organizing the bookshelf. During the state funeral, was it really okay that your name wasn't mentioned? As they tidied up, Crush asked Ferris a casual question. You prevented an incident before it happened and identified the culprit. Both I and His Highness Fourier think you should be properly recognized for that. It's fine. Ferry-chan. I'm not particularly interested in honor, and just avenging my teacher was enough for me. After all, it was that huge guy that did it. He remembered the image of Marcos, clad in stone armor, slaughtering the evil man in a single blow. That was not a man who would end up just as an ordinary knight. In fact, they heard that he's being promoted for his achievement, which is an appropriate evaluation. But if Lady Crush insists, I'll definitely go and receive a medal or something, okay? Well, at least if I don't end up being detained in the capital again. I can't say that it won't happen. Crush's voice became slightly clouded, as if something had just occurred to her. Then, unusually, Crush chose her words for Ferris with extra caution. In truth, the practitioners who saw your work at the venue said that your abilities are far above average. In other words, there seems to be a clear push for you to become the next Blue. Does that mean that if things go wrong, I might end up stuck in the capital forever? At that hopeless possibility, Ferris let out a shriek. Putting aside the prestige of the title of Blue, he knew the trouble that came with it from his time helping Garich. If he were to receive that title, he wouldn't be able to continue being Crush's attendant as he was before. For Ferris, it would be the end of the world. Hey, is there anything you can do about it? Ferris, I really am sorry. But, His Highness Fourier is in the capital. I'm sure you won't be lonely. Arg, High Highness alone won't do. I can't live without Lady Crush. Please, take me and His Highness and escape with us. Clutching Crush's arm, Ferris pleaded with a tearful face. If the kingdom wouldn't allow the two of them to be together, he was willing to abandon everything and run away. If they could take Fourier with them, it would be a dream come true for Ferris. Ferris, hearing Ferris's plea, Crush's eyes grew slightly larger. Then she let out a small sigh, and a guilty look appeared on her resolute face. Forgive me. I got a little carried away with teasing you, Lady Crush. The reports from the practitioners, we suppressed them with His Highness. For now, you are still my attendant. Hopefully, it will stay that way forever, Lady Crush. When did you become such a mean person? It's been 3 months since we spent time like this. During that time, as you've improved yourself, I also thought of making some changes. I'm happy to see the different sides of Lady Crush, but that one was bad for my heart. I see, I'm sorry. I'll try to do better next time. Crush was ambitious, but Fourier was negatively influencing her direction. Ferris sighed in relief, deciding to complain directly to Fourier later. He respected Garrick and was eternally grateful for his teachings over the past 3 months. However, the most important person to him was Crush, followed by Fourier. That was something he wouldn't compromise on. No compromises. No matter the reason. So, I'm sorry, but I can't be the successor of Teacher's Blue. Apologizing to the absent professor, Ferris returned to tidying the desk once again. After compiling the medical records into one pile, Ferris finally noticed an envelope. The envelope, mixed in with a stack of papers, was bulging and full of letters. These are letters from patients. Inside the envelope were letters Garrick exchanged with his patients. The messages varied wildly, from good news about recovery, to thanks from families of deceased patients for his efforts, to bitter strings of complaints that went on for years. All of them testified to the life of Garrick Fabless, the Blue. Lady Crush, will the professor's patients be taken over by other healing practitioners? Ordinarily, yes. However, even at the Royal Treatment Center, one cannot expect practitioners of the same caliber as Lord Fabless, the same caliber as Teacher. As he listened to Crush's response, Ferris opened the files of patients he had just organized. It was a kind of hand-me-down, with no particular purpose. Then he found the deciding factor. Something fell onto the desk from the stack of papers. Following it with his eyes, Ferris let out an involuntary cry. It was a yellow flower. The pressed flower, sandwiched between the documents, was familiar to him. It was the flower Ferris had received from a suspicious man, which he then forced onto Garrick. He really did keep it. That skeleton healer. Picking up the pressed flower, Ferris muttered with regret. Then, he refocused on the patients, the work that Garrick had left behind. Lady Crush, Lady Crush. Ferry-chan is wondering, perhaps, if Ferry-chan works hard as a healing practitioner, could it also be considered the achievement of his master, Lady Crush? I suppose some would see it that way. Crush frowned at Ferris's statement and replied with a questioning look on her face. Ferris nodded in agreement and traced the names of the patients with his finger. Many of his patients were important figures from the kingdom. Some have regular checkups or have received treatment from Garrick for many years. Isn't Lord Bordeaux-Zeljeff a prominent member of the Council of Wise Men? It might not hurt to do him a favor. Ferris, what in the world are you thinking? Well, Ferry-chan always puts Lady Crush first. Above all, it would benefit Crush. At the same time, it would help continue Garrick's legacy. Although he didn't want to get stuck in the royal capital, he would be happy to go there regularly and visit the patients left behind by Garrick. It would be the best way for Ferris to honor his kindness and goodwill. But I absolutely refuse to become the successor of Blue. Sticking out his tongue, Ferris rejected the ill-fitting title of Garrick. Unfortunately, several years later, Ferris was recognized for his sense of duty in taking over Garrick's patients, and ultimately inherited the title of Blue. His only condition for accepting the title was that he would never be separated from his master, Crush. That was the sole wish of Ferris Argyle, the Blue, who became the kingdom's best healer.
Chapter 12.
And this is a marginal note in the story of the successor of Blue. It's a scene from a conversation between minor characters in a certain tavern. Congratulations! I heard your latest achievement has promoted you to the position of captain, right? Do you think I'm happy about that? I didn't come here to hear your sarcasm. Oh, so scary. You've still got that mad dog vibe from before. Did you become more round? No, more square. No, you've always been like that. I'm heading out. Wait, you don't get jokes, huh? We've been friends for ages. Russell never shows up when I call him. Let's catch up a bit. You're the one who hasn't changed his stubborn attitude. Why can't you be honest about your grief? Grief? Me? It's funny to suggest that I'm grieving. This is a toast, you know, a toast for your promotion and the defeat of an enemy of Lord Garich. Marcos, are you happy about that? About Lord Garich? Well, some things are better left unsaid. Besides, you know, it was you, his friend, that avenged Garich by killing his enemy. And that child was there too. Garich's beloved disciple, wasn't she? Yeah. If she hadn't been there, the damage could have been unprecedented. I could have done something about that myself. I just didn't want to get in the way. You really are something else. And what do you mean by getting in the way? It's obvious. The desire for revenge. The student had to avenge his teacher. That's why this is a toast to the future Blue. The gentle sound of glasses clinking echoed briefly through the tavern.